Let's go Ravens! What if I told you that one of the biggest debates surrounding Lamar Jackson right now has absolutely nothing to do with what he's doing on the field, and everything to do with what some people think might happen years from now? Think about that for a moment. While Lamar continues to be one of the most talked about quarterbacks in football, there are still voices questioning his future, questioning his style of play, and questioning whether his success can last. But here's the interesting part. Why are some people so focused on hypothetical scenarios when the evidence is already right in front of them? That's exactly why a recent discussion involving Mike Florio and Chris Sims caught so much attention. What started as a conversation about Lamar's future quickly turned into something much bigger, exposing a debate that Ravens fans have been hearing for years. Before we dive into everything that was said, make sure you hit the like button if you believe the best is still ahead for the Baltimore Ravens. And let's get the comment section fired up today. Comment below. Ravens 2026, our best days are still ahead. I want to see how many optimistic Ravens fans are watching right now because the conversation we're about to have raises a very important question about Lamar Jackson, the respect he receives, and why certain narratives simply refuse to disappear. One of the biggest discussions surrounding Lamar Jackson right now is not about something he did on the field, but about the way people continue to talk about him. A recent debate involving Mike Florio and Chris Sims brought that topic back into the spotlight, and it created a strong reaction because of how differently both men viewed Lamar Jackson and his future as a quarterback. The discussion centered around a familiar argument. Mike Florio raised concerns about what could happen as Lamar Jackson gets older and eventually loses some of the running ability that has made him such a unique player. The idea was that if defenses no longer have to worry about Lamar as a running threat, defending him as a passer could become easier. That was the foundation of the concern being discussed. But what made this conversation especially interesting was the response from Chris Sims. Rather than focusing on hypothetical scenarios, he pushed back strongly and questioned why people continue to overlook what Lamar Jackson has already shown as a passer. Sims pointed directly to Lamar's ability to throw the football, make decisions, and produce at a high level through the air. He argued that many people continue to treat Lamar as if he is only dangerous because of his legs, while ignoring the passing production that has already been displayed. Throughout the exchange, Sims repeatedly emphasized that Lamar is an efficient passer and an outstanding decision-maker. He expressed frustration with the idea that conversations about Lamar often begin with what-if scenarios instead of focusing on what is actually happening on the field. According to Sims, people continue to bring up possibilities about future decline while overlooking the quarterback Lamar Jackson is right now. That became one of the central themes of the debate. On one side, there was concern about aging, changes in playing style, and how defenses might react in the future. On the other side, there was a focus on current production, current performance, and the evidence that already exists. Chris Sims made it clear that he believes Lamar Jackson has proven he can succeed as a passer and operate effectively from the pocket. The discussion became even more intense when Sims questioned why similar conversations are not constantly attached to other elite quarterbacks. He suggested that Lamar receives criticism that often feels different from the criticism directed at other star players. Instead of discussing what he has accomplished, some conversations continue to revolve around concerns about what could happen years down the road. Another important point raised was the idea that Lamar Jackson's critics frequently rely on hypotheticals. Rather than evaluating current results, they focus on future possibilities and worst-case scenarios. That observation became a major part of the reaction to Florio's comments because it highlighted a frustration that many supporters have felt for a long time. The debate also became personal at times, with visible frustration during the exchange. Sims appeared surprised by how strongly Florio was pushing the discussion, and he continued returning to the same core argument. Lamar Jackson has already demonstrated that he can beat defenses with his arm. And that reality should carry more weight than speculation about what might happen later. What makes this story so fascinating is that it is not really about a single television segment. It reflects a larger conversation that has followed Lamar Jackson for years. Even now, despite everything that has been shown on the field, there are still debates about what he can or cannot become. And during this particular discussion, Chris Sims made it clear that he believes those doubts are misplaced and that too much attention is being given to hypothetical concerns instead of actual performance. The reason this debate keeps resurfacing is because it touches on something that has followed Lamar Jackson throughout his entire football career. Even when he produces at an elite level, there are always people who seem more interested in discussing limitations than accomplishments. That was exactly what stood out during this exchange. Instead of celebrating what Lamar has already proven, the conversation once again shifted toward questions about what might happen someday if certain parts of his game change. What Chris Sims appeared to be challenging was not simply the idea that quarterbacks age. Every quarterback ages. Every player eventually changes physically. His point was that Lamar Jackson has already shown enough growth and development as a passer that these conversations should not automatically begin with doubt. Sims repeatedly pointed back to Lamar's passing ability, decision-making, and efficiency whenever concerns about the future were brought up. That response resonated because it focused on evidence rather than assumptions. During the discussion, Sims essentially argued that if a defense wants to focus entirely on stopping Lamar as a passer, he has already demonstrated that he can still succeed. He rejected the idea that Lamar's value is tied exclusively to his running ability and stressed that his arm talent and football intelligence deserve much more recognition than they often receive. One of the more noticeable moments came when Sims questioned why discussions about decline seem to appear around Lamar even though he is still relatively young. The conversation became less about football analysis and more about why these narratives continue to follow him. That was where the disagreement became especially sharp, because Sims seemed frustrated that the focus kept returning to future decline instead of present performance. For many Ravens fans, that frustration is probably easy to understand. The argument presented during the segment was not centered on something Lamar was struggling with. It was centered on a future scenario. And according to the reaction discussed in the source material, that pattern has become familiar. There is often an emphasis on hypothetical situations rather than what is actually taking place on the field right now. Another important element of the conversation involved the perception of Lamar Jackson. Sims referenced the fact that some people still seem reluctant to fully acknowledge his evolution as a quarterback. Despite years of production, there remains a group of critics who continue viewing him through an outdated lens. That was one of the major frustrations highlighted during the exchange. The discussion eventually became heated enough that Sims openly questioned why Florio appeared so bothered by the topic. Instead of backing away from his position, he doubled down on his belief that Lamar deserves more respect for the player he currently is. He continued emphasizing that Lamar's passing efficiency and overall quarterback play are real strengths that should be central to the conversation. What makes this story particularly interesting is that neither side was really debating whether Lamar Jackson is talented. The disagreement centered on how much weight should be given to future projections versus current reality. Florio focused on what could happen eventually. Sims focused on what Lamar is doing right now. Those are two very different ways of evaluating a player, and they produce two very different conclusions. As this discussion continues among Ravens fans, one thing is clear: the conversation around Lamar Jackson is not slowing down anytime soon. As long as he continues playing, there will be people discussing his future, his style of play, and what comes next. But based on this exchange, there are also plenty of voices willing to push back whenever they feel the criticism goes too far or ignores what has already been accomplished. And that brings us to the biggest takeaway from this entire story. The debate was never really about statistics, age, or even scheme. It was about respect. It was about whether Lamar Jackson is being evaluated based on reality or based on assumptions. Chris Sims clearly believes the answer should be reality, and he made sure that point was heard loud and clear during this discussion. If you are a Ravens fan, where do you stand on this debate? Do you think Lamar Jackson still receives unfair criticism compared to other quarterbacks, or do you believe these future projections are a fair part of evaluating every NFL player? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and tell me whether you agreed more with Chris Sims or Mike Florio on this one.